Providence, Utah is where our corporate headquarters is. And when you walk right in, they've got a series of one-liner slogans up there. And one of them says, beautifully simple. When you use the word simple and the word meter automation in the same sentences, you see city managers at these conferences shake their head, go, they had nothing simple about automation and meter changeouts. Next Meters has evolved a platform that brings the beautifully simple together in a very, very real package that simplifies this. A plug and play where you open it out of the box and it's easy to use. That's the strive, or that's the effort and the goal. And I think Next has done a great job at simplifying the meter and automation concept. And I think they've done a good job at bringing those key components together. So beautifully simple.
Hello and welcome to The Clear Voice, brought to you by Clear Career Professionals. I'm your host, James Groom. With the summer heat bearing down on us in Texas as we record this, we thought we would bring you a story that is fitting for weather like this. We'll be talking water, lakes, fishing, and customer satisfaction. Our guest today is Ben Jarrett, who is a regional sales director for Next Meters USA. Ben, welcome to The Clear Voice.
Hey, thank you for having me, James.
Ben, I'm excited to talk about this as it hits a couple of things that I'm interested in, namely water conservation, water scarcity, things like that. But before we get into all that, one of the things we love talking about is interesting career journeys. And you've had an interesting journey, I think, personally. Yours might be the most unique one that we featured. So if you can tell us, how does a professional bass fisherman end up in the water utility world?
I think it's the substance just in general. Grew up in a family that loved the outdoors and swimming and fishing and in lakes. And as soon as I went to college and got off down in East Texas at Stephen F. Austin State University, Sam Rayburn and Toledo Bend reservoirs are two great places to go on long weekends when you're in college for fishing. I think the affinity for water just led me down a path to where all I wanted to do was just be a pro fisherman. That just sounded like such a great idea, you know. I pursued that career after school and got into pro fishing, traveled all over the country fishing out of a van, truly living down by the river in a van from the famous movie line. About year 4 of that, I got an opportunity to go to work for a boat company and did that for almost a little over 20 years, boat and motor company in the marine industry itself. And segued there from a neighbor that was in the water meter business, and I was looking for a change. And next thing you know, here I am in the meter and automation from the last decade, or really kind of finishing out the 4th quarter of my career. And it's been wonderful. Water's the general theme, but I figured if I can float on it in a boat, I can measure it through a pipe for a city, right?
Yeah, it's definitely both are important aspects of the water world. Did you grow up fishing and it was a natural progression, or did you really just discover it while you were at college? And how you determine that you can go professional?
To go back, really, my father was a fisherman and my grandfather was a fisherman. And so growing up in a family that used that discretionary time away, you know, for part of our vacations were around fishing. I was active in Boy Scouts and we always, you know, were camping near lakes and rivers. And so fishing was a big part of growing up for me. To be able to watch TV on Sunday afternoons, you know, in the 90s, there was a thing called the Nashville Network that had the outdoor channel on there. So anybody that's in their 50s is going to remember that if you were into the outdoors, where you could watch all kinds of fishing and hunting on TV. And so watching those guys catch those fish in tournaments on TV, I said, I've got to learn more. When I went off to school, I did my degree in marketing with an emphasis in public relations, and I did all my projects on companies in the fishing industry. So boat companies, motor companies, lure companies. If I could write a term paper about public relations on how to market a lure or a bait, I did it in college. And that gave me access to a lot of industry professionals and people, which segued my way into pro fishing. That's about building a sponsor base and building up your media packet back then, working with outdoor writers to get into the magazines and all the things before the internet. And that was a way that lure companies and bait companies, boat companies, motor companies promoted, was through individuals. That's how I built my base and got out there and started fishing on the tour by just paying your entry fees and getting involved. And I did really, really well my first, second, and third year. And when I went in to renegotiate my contract with my boat company, which was Skeeter Boats in Kilgore, Texas, they said, yeah, we'll give you a raise. We're going to give you a job. And so I hung my sticks up and became the marketing and public relations manager in 1994 for Skeeter Boat Company, where I stayed a long time.
When you were fishing the tournament, you told me that to make ends meet, sometimes you had to do a lot of menial labor. So I just want to make sure that if there's any kids listening to this, it's not all the glory.
The glamorous side of the romantic side of professional fishing often hits with the reality, which comes in between the tournaments. And I think you'll find this common with race car drivers or rodeo riders or pro fishermen. It could be anything in that sport. There was a lot of things that went on in between the tournaments that involved the word laborers. I've roofed a high school auditorium in Maryland. I've worked at a Walmart pushing in buggies in Columbia, South Carolina, and done a little bit of everything in between, those tournaments to make ends meet and gas money to come back to Texas.
And all your time with, whether it be fishing or selling boats or selling water meters, what have you learned about people?
In general, the people that you surround yourself with and in the industry and that you work with, at the end of the day, the hard workers and the ones that strive to go out and be robust in their career and push themselves to be better always rise to the top regardless of the task in front of you. And so one thing I've learned about people is that we're all the same. I think everybody that's in a career minded with a focus that wants to achieve better and do better, you prepare. Being prepared was a common theme. I think I learned a lot about people that really wanted to excel in any career, whether it be fishing or meter and automation business, or anything for that matter. My father was a physician. He was a pulmonologist at Baylor in Dallas for about 30 years. I've never watched anybody with a work ethic so hard, and I think that's common in a cut where we often are influenced by somebody in our family as well.
I love those people that are self-motivated, and I always say they have a motor. And I wonder if you can train that or if that's something that's just naturally there and you can tap into it.
I think it is trainable, but you got to see it, or you got to see that internal light or that internal feel that gives you that drive to pursue the unknown of, can I do this? Do I have the ability to do this? I experienced a little bit of that when I was on the Bassmaster Tour of fishing. Growing up, reading about my heroes in the sport, the professional fishing guides and the tournament winners that were winning all these fishing events. And once I got out there and about year 2 or year 3, and I was doing good, I finished 10th in a huge tournament in New York, and I finished high in a big tournament in Florida. All of a sudden, I was beating some of my heroes. And one night before I went to bed, I think I found the reason why I'm actually out here. Is it really to be the hero, fisherman, pro? Or was I trying to find out if I was good enough or not? And I answered that question. Yeah, I can compete with my heroes. It wasn't about a month after that's when I got the job offer from Skeeter, and I put down my fishing poles and went to work and got a real job, so to speak. People were like, why did you quit? Why did you quit? Well, I think I answered a question. Internally, if you're able to answer that question about to be better and can I be better, and then somehow touch it and answer it a little bit, in your own way, that fueled me to move on to the next part of my career. And I think that affects all of us that have that clock of desire to be better.
They say you should never meet your heroes. Did any of them disappoint you as you were coming up and becoming a competitor for them?
I was blessed. The majority of them were very welcoming. And a lot of them I had written letters to when I was in college. So they were like, oh, you're the kid that wrote the letter to me. Back then there was no email or anything else. Of course, you had a few that were, their arrogance tripped them on their way to the stage. But at the end of the day, the majority of them were outstanding. I had some great peers. Real fortunate.
Sometimes when I see the news and fishing tournaments are in there, the last one I saw was people using fishing lures or fishing weights, I guess, to increase their weight and basically caught cheating. I don't know about other states, but I believe that's a felony in Texas.
Oh, it's a felony everywhere. Those are commonly in smaller regional events where you have a lot of amateurs fishing in a tournament. The events that we were in, we had observers, and oftentimes were paired with another competitor where we had to sign a legal slip at the end of each day that the fish were caught in a fair and sporting manner as per the rules of the event. And a lot were televised. So, there was no hiding. Fortunately, there is a felony for that. There's a lot of people behind bars that have gotten caught doing that.
I really don't want to go to jail for anything, but if I had to pick what I was going to jail for, that would not be one of the options. I bet prisoners don't take kindly to fishing tournament cheaters.
Yeah, that's of all the things, right?
Yeah. One of the things I like about hunting and fishing is the people that are most passionate about it are generally very big into the conservation of that thing. Is that true with fishing? Did you find that in the tournament that, the things that are most important, those natural habitats and also the lakes and the rivers and keeping those clean and available for generations to come? Was that something that was a passion of yours and other people in the sport?
Oh, absolutely. We were all a member of what's called the Bass Angler Sportsman Society, or BASS, which was the governing organization of professional bass fishing. And they had a division that was really solely dedicated to conservation. We were all members of that division as a part of the Association of BASS Professionals. And conservation was a big part of it, not only, raising money for fish habitat and for restocking of, certain strains of bass that would improve fisheries in, reservoirs across America. The trash cleanup programs and the lake restoration programs and all that. There was always a great deal of involvement with the pros in that. The passion, for the water, the resource that we all need, and that what we needed to have a healthy place to compete and fish. And then on top of that, there was another layer of organizations in Texas, TBBU, called Texas Black Bass Unlimited. Not even sure if they're around today, but they were huge back in the day with fundraisers and events for just the state of Texas. And all the pros that were from Texas and surrounding states participated in those organizations. So from a regional and national level, you saw a lot of names and faces there. A notable name like Jimmy Houston, a famous fisherman. I had a TV show, Bill Dance. Maybe somebody will recognize on the podcast. When Bill Dance comes to a seminar, they'll pack it the house with people coming to see him. So it was a good way for them to give back to the resources.
I definitely remember Bill Dance's name, and the only other name that I really remember from the sport is Dorf. I don't know if that counts or not.
Yeah, Dorf. I don't remember the Dorf. Who's Dorf?
We talked with Andrew Weber back in episode 49 about the potential water crisis. He's a champion of protecting groundwater. That's one of those things that we've also seen in the news. Corpus Christi is one of the newest examples of that. Lots of drought, depleted reservoirs. Last I heard, they were still looking at emergency procedures and trying to make sure that they had enough water to operate. How does that interact with your new role selling smart water meters?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Texas is a great example of how precious our water resources are and the protection of those, I say, and the management of it. Directly tied to what I do in selling meter and automation. We know water is important. It's a critical part of our lives, our daily lives, and then obviously a municipality functioning in all the capacities that water finds its way into municipalities' world. It's a big ticket item, it's, if not the sole ticket item that drives a community a great deal. And so the protection of that and putting in the plans in place to be stewards of the resource. And stewardship begins with how well we take care of it, one, but two, the awareness of what we do with it. It is a limited quantity that's replenishable only at a rate at which Mother Nature allows it to be. Understanding the big picture of that and what we can do to conserve is huge. And so it directly ties in to the infrastructure upgrades that utilities are faced with and are becoming more timely in deciding upon. A water meter is a direct cash register to a city. It's what helps drive the revenue, and it drives, what we all wake up and drive around on and enforce and protect in our communities. Making sure that we're doing a good job, knowing about how much water we're using, and if not, more importantly, how much water we're losing. So we can address those infrastructure needs proactively and not reactively. And so that it directly ties into the smart metering initiative, the replacement of the old and outdated measuring devices with something new and more modern that gives us a way to make business decisions that help us improve the longevity of our efforts there.
I know the regular meters, if there was an issue and you didn't discover it with the pools of water or whatever the outward symptom was, you might not know that you've lost a lot of water until the bill comes, which would have happened monthly on our meter reading.
Yes.
What's the time period on a smart meter, like what you guys offer, where like a customer might know that there's an issue?
Yeah, well, smart metering affords many things, and direct interaction with alarms is one of them. Again, an old meter was read, let's say once a month, where the meter reader comes around, writes down the read, takes it back into the office. It goes into the billing software. The billing is calculated, this month's read versus last month's read, creates a usage and applied to a rate chart, and therefore you get a bill. By the time you get that bill, it's been 5 or 6 weeks since the start of the month prior. If you have a high bill and you go, wow, I have a leak, or there's no way I use that much water, and you start looking to try to figure out why, it's way down the road by then. The clock has been ticking a long time. In smart metering, the radio or the electronic device that is interrogating the measuring chamber is interrogating it every few seconds. And so on a moment's notice, it can trigger an alarm based on parameters that are set by the city or preset by the meter itself. So continuous flow or excessive flow that are out of parameters or out of guidelines set by the city triggers an alarm immediately at the meter, which then backfills into the software. An alarm comes directly from the meter through the cloud straight to the software at the city. So alarms are immediate. Within 3 to 5 minutes, you can have a direct alarm of an event that is occurring at that time. And we're no longer relying on the luck of a utility worker driving through a neighborhood and seeing water running down the street, or somebody calling in about an event. We can see water loss almost immediately. It's a very powerful tool to have. For utilities that have manually read for, since the dawn of time, it's overwhelming almost, because you have so much data coming at you and information that a huge part of our training is teaching them how to digest that data, what to act on, excessive flow, leaks, all these different things that are coming at you, because you're mapping the invisible for the first time proactively, not reactively, which is a big deal.
I used to office next to the water utility billing clerk, and that's where I had to walk through to get to the rest of the building. And so I heard a lot of phone conversations and a lot of angry customers at the window. I didn't realize until I was talking to them, seeing some of these issues, that even like a toilet running can cause hundreds of dollars in usage in a month if it's not turned off by the resident and fixed.
Absolutely. And you just don't realize it, or, a gallon at a time, and the bowl can flush out due to a flapper that's got, moss or growth on it, or the slime that gets around it that's from the holding tank, and you don't get a good seal. And so it's constantly dripping water in it. When you lay automation over a utility, all right, all of the hidden things come to fruition, because things that you never thought of, a dripping ice cream scoop faucet at every ice cream store in town shows you how much water that they actually use. The little dripping faucet, and you put your scoop in there so it's wet when you go in to get the scoop. Then they dip it back in the water so it's easier for them to get your chocolate man and your vanilla and all the goodies on top of your big cone. You'd be surprised how much water that eats. Commercial ice makers constantly dripping out the bottom, making new ice, just running water all the time. How much ice are you using versus how much water is leaking out the bottom? Swimming pools, famous place for leaks, where your filler is constantly keeping up with your evaporation, for instance, but you can't see the leak around the light. When does evaporation slow down enough to see a leak? All these things trigger these alarms and alerts and show you exactly how much is actually going to waste. Being able to have those alarms immediately sure gives you the power to at least know that something's an anomaly or something's different about my water usage and pattern. Probably one of the best alarms that homeowners now can set is one that says, when I use a certain percentage over my last 30-day average, I want a text. If I use 15% more than my last 30-day average at any time during a 30-day window, I want to know about it because something happened. And that's powerful because it really gives you a chance to look and see what's going on. A leak on a 100-foot hose that's on the west side of a house, okay? So if a faucet's dripping in a 100-foot hose and the hose is coiled up on the side of a house in the west sun, it evaporates all the water in that hose before it leaks out the end. Nobody ever sees it, and it can be dripping forever. Those things show up big time on the reports.
So it's not just the city that can see this as an individual customer on their meter?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the individual customer has not logged into the portal or is not set up for alarms. The city can one-click button setups for those and preset them up for people that may not have access to do it themselves on a computer. It's very powerful information to get in the hands of the customer. And again, the utility can see it as well.
If people can see this and they can get those alarms and fix those issues, I would guess that would improve your customer satisfaction. You wouldn't get those angry phone calls and angry lobby visits as much when people have the access to the tools.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, all those alarms are time stamped as well in the customer portal. So you can see there's been 26 notifications to this individual at 306 Johnson Street about their excessive flow alert. And so when they get an abnormally high bill, it's really easy to say, hey, we've sent you this notification. You obviously haven't taken care of it. You need to. You can go back and see exactly when the leak started. That transparent information, I think, is huge. In the old days, it was my word versus yours. We would send somebody back out to reread the meter to make sure they didn't write down the numbers wrong, or a 3 became an 8, or when you're using the old clipboard technology, writing that meter read down, we're human and we can 10 key one in wrong at the billing department or, handwrite it wrong down in the field. So being able to catch that on the front side's big, and it definitely helps the angst and surprise that comes with a water bill that's out of its spec or expectation.
Tell me what happens when these regular meters have maybe gone past their lifespan. What starts breaking on those? Do they underread, overread? And how does that affect the utility if they're not being replaced when they should be?
The little brass meters that have been around forever have, regardless of the manufacturer, the manual read meters, all of them were built really very similar. They have plastic gears on the inside of it, or a plastic chamber, plastic measuring device. There's multiple different kinds. There's a PD, there's a nutating disc, there's a multi-jet, there's a single jet meter. So multiple measuring devices. Regardless, they all wear out over time. Utilities have often strived for, a 5 to 7, 10-year change-out period. Once you get so many gallons on a meter that you need to change it out, because as those guts wear out or the gears wear out on the inside of it, the meters slow down typically, all right, where it takes more pressure to get the chamber moving the right way, or it takes a little bit more, usage to be able to get it spinning. And so sometimes brushing your teeth can slip through the gears without it being enough to activate that old groove that plastic device is cut into the plastic on the inside of it. Therefore you're missing low flow, all right? Like on what we call a positive displacement meter. They're famous for giving up low flow in their old age, but work great on medium and high flow because the way the chamber's made. Bottom line, regardless of the mechanics of it, the internals of those just flat out don't get inaccurate as they age. And so that can affect utilities in a water loss sense because you just can't see it. The water going through the meter that's not being captured due to an old mechanical meter can definitely be a source of that. Most utilities, and even including the large utilities, a lot of them are going with an ultrasonic meter, or what we call no moving parts, which is being adopted by a lot of big cities. And a lot of the larger meters, 2 inches and up, the big stuff that pushes a lot of water out, have already gone to an ultrasonic meter, which has no moving parts to it, which, uses ultrasonic waves to measure the water in an algorithm that are very, very accurate at low flow and have long lifespan. And don't drop off in their accuracy as the meter ages. It's a real challenge for utilities to make sure they have current meters that are working properly.
I got to be involved a little bit with a water rate study one time. And of course, that's your future planning. That's how are we going to charge different kinds of customers in our system?
Yes.
And if you don't have good data, it's really hard to provide an accurate rate.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Having good quality data and a baseline for that, and then really having access to that data to be able to do something with it, So once you have a good quality meter system with some way to aggregate that data electronically, all that goes into reports and formatting that gives you the ability to put a visual to the usage and the timing of the usage and the gallons being used at the different times during the business year. The 250 days of work days of 243 or however many days there are that we actually work, and minus weekends and holidays, you can really map that out and chart that usage, which really helps on so many different things. One, planning how much water we need to have in our tanks to prepare for those upswings in cycle use, as well as the rates, for totalization. What do they really use in a year's time in a commercial application with a large meter to be able to establish those rates? So data is powerful. It really is. And aggregating, collecting that data, how we organize it to see it easy enough to make business decisions like that is super important these days.
Do you have any estimates on how many systems are still using the older technology, or I guess no technology, versus newer smart meters?
About 10 years ago, I saw some data that, estimated that 50% of the United States was still on some sort of version of manual read or partial manual read. I think that's improved some since then. I haven't seen anything really recently on that, just because a lot of utilities really have made a lot of progress on that in the last 5 years, I would say. But even some of the largest cities are not fully automated. It's such a daunting task. And with all the other things that are in front of a utility, aging infrastructure, aging pipes, aging valves, fire hydrants, and other things, metering is just one component of a part of a bigger picture. I'm going to say probably 60% would be my guess right now, have some version of automation now or a partial. They're testing. They've got 1,000 of their 30,000 where they're trying to get a feel for it to see how it works and learn. And then you have a good number of them that are now replacing it. They're out of their warranty period. They're in past the 8, 10, 12, 15 years time frame of the old technology, and they're moving towards the next. And so there's a lot of upgrades going on right now at the same time. Probably a little more than half are playing in the game for sure, that are at least making a step towards that.
I guess for any city that makes that transition, they should be capturing a lot more manpower to do other things in public works. There's never a shortage of jobs to do. The last small city that I worked for that was manually reading most of their meters, that was an all-day thing for 2 people.
That's one of the very, very common questions that I get asked with a utility that has no automation, and they have, full-time meter readers, or they have meter readers that they do lots of different things, but then the 3 or 4 days of the month, they focus on just the meter reading. Yeah, it gives the utility back a lot of time, and the list of things for utilities to take care of is so long. Just giving them the 3 or 4 days where they don't have to read meters still doesn't accommodate what they really need to get to do. They're taking care of the cemetery. They're taking care of all the water towers. They're taking care of all this and the easements by the city park. There's so many other things that fall under utilities jurisdiction, or a public works, let's say, jurisdiction, that meter reading all of a sudden, becomes oh, wow, it's time to meter read again. I got to quit doing all these other things. There's not many utilities have a valve exercise program where they go make sure all the valves work in the whole city. We need to be doing that kind of stuff. Those are important things that we need to be doing. Maintenance, on things that need to be maintained that are just outside the, the core critical, but are still important. It redirects their time, and it really allows cities to do more things to get ahead. It's not just being able to see the water and see the leaks and see all those things, but it gives the city the opportunity to be proactive on some things that are probably long overdue for some work.
For a city that is coming straight from no automation and they want to jump into smart meters, what does that rollout look like? The training, is that phased usually into the system? How does that go when they sign on the dotted line?
Basically, what we do is we try to time the installation in between their reading cycles. You plan for however long it's going to take and to install the devices. So if it's 1,000 meters in a city and we're going to put in 250 a week, we try to do it in between the reading cycles. And then we have a blackout period when they manually read again. So to get through it is fairly easy just through some planning. What's the less disruptive for the city where we can take automated reads and manual reads, combine them in billing until we get all the automation completed. And then some very detailed scheduling happens on the commercial replacement meters. So when you're dealing with a hospital or a business or a 24-hour Whataburger, for instance, you got to schedule when you're going to change their meter out because they're not going to have access to water. So there's some scheduling that takes place for all the commercial unit replacements, and a lot of those are done at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so we can do it during an off period time of high use. Once the system's installed, it's really truly all about people and processes at that point. This is just a thing, and how well we manage that thing and take care of it and maintain it from that point forward. Automation doesn't mean we don't ever have to touch it again, because things happen in a utility. We all know that. There's things that get run over. There's things that get hit. There's things that get damaged. And when a meter, is out there in a meter box, it's subject to all kinds of things, from a tractor running over it or a bush hog hitting it, or, all million other things that could possibly happen. So we teach them primarily how to take care of the system, maintain it, stay on top of, and then protect the integrity of the data when you do make changes. So when you add a meter and you add stuff, you got to add a radio that goes with it. And then making sure it's programmed correctly to land in the software properly, so we keep our data clean. The billing data and the meter reading data all mirror each other. So it's really the same process. It's procuring the reads, managing the data, and then protecting the investment of the utility as time goes on. And so it becomes really a coaching event. I often say that after we get something installed, I become their offensive coordinator. And so I'm teaching them how to score with the system. All right, you got it in the ground. Here's what we do. Here's the reports we want to run. Here's what we want to see. Here's what we're looking for. We want to make sure it's reading like it should. But once we confirm all those things, here's all the things you need to be looking at to be proactive in your system. Really teaching them how to get the most out of it. Two groups. You got the field and you have the office at a utility. So there's two different groups of people. How do you prepare the office for the customers coming in because they had an inaccurate meter that was 30 years old in their front yard? They got a brand new meter. All of a sudden, they're actually getting billed for what they're being used to. How do you deal with that? What do you give to them? How do you converse through those hard conversations? So we teach the human side of it. How do you deal with it? We've got this thing. What are the benefits? How do we use it to interact with our customers? And then how do we keep it maintained so it gives the most to the city?
When cities are looking to make a change, are there any red flags when they're looking at the different options, or anything that they should avoid?
Yeah, I think that technology, has progressed so much in the last decade in automation and meters. And it's very, very common for utilities to think that a drive-by system is their first natural step towards automation. AMI, or read it from the office, or advanced meter infrastructure, is what everybody really wants. All right. That was once thought the Cadillac or the Porsche or the high end of a automation movement within a utility. And now that's really becoming more the norm. Okay. Drive-by systems is a passive system. It's a way to get a read once a month, 12 times a year, to make bills on time, which is a big leap from manually reading. But having hourly data at the hands of your utility is by far more important than making bills 12 times a year on time, when you're really looking at managing your whole water system and not just a billing event, every 30 days. I think the thing is for a utility to look at what the options are available to give them that. Every utility is laid out differently geographically. Can you do it with radio frequency? Can you do it with cellular? Can you do it with both, or a hybrid, of those? What are the advantages and disadvantages of all these different components that go within those things, and choosing the best option for your city that provides you the longest return on investment, I think is, the root of it. And I think everybody wants to do that. There's only, 10 automation companies out there. So there's only very, very few, you think, in this big world. 10, maybe 11, 12 that are here in America, but about 9 or 10 that are the major players. Thank goodness. A lot of people make great stuff. The way they work are fundamentally similar, but different. When you get into the details, I would challenge a city to really look at the software. At the end of the day, the meter's the shovel. Okay. We expect it to get the reads out of the box. The radio is the transmission device, whether it's RF band or cellular band, back to the office, right? But when you get that information, spending a lot of time in the software, spending a lot of time in a customer portal, learning how to use it, an interpretation of that data and what you do with it, to me, is probably one of the biggest things. So how easy is the software to read? How functional is it for me and my team? I think spending more time in that world on the real life use of the data is almost, if not as important as what you're putting in the ground out there.
what separates Next Meters from its competition?
Providence, Utah is where our corporate headquarters is. And when you walk right in, they've got a series of, kind of one-liner slogans up there. And one of them says beautifully simple. And when you use the word simple and the word meter automation in the same sentences, you see city managers at these conferences shake their head, go, they had nothing simple about automation and meter change out, swap out and AMI. But I would think that Next Meters has evolved a platform that brings the beautifully simple together in a very, very real package that simplifies this, and probably have done, if not one of the best jobs of that. When you open up an iPhone, there's no instruction manual, right? And when I got my very first iPhone, I'm like, how are we going to use this? And you click the button and it kind of tells you what to do. And next thing you know, you're swiping around and you're doing this and that, and you're loading up apps. And within 2 weeks, you're a professional at this thing. So if you almost took that same concept and said a plug and play where you open it out of the box and it's easy to use, that's the strive, or that's the effort and the goal. And I think Next has done a great job at simplifying the meter and automation concept. They've been doing it a long time. They focused on software. They focused on the products that bring it in consistently, and then put the support and people in place to train. Simplicity, it doesn't have to be complicated like it used to be. Put an automated tool into a meter box and having it read to the office and display hourly data, within minutes of an installation. And the meter might be 200 miles away from the office. It'll change the way you perceive how data flies through the air these days compared to the way it used to. Harnessing that power, making it easy, and then giving the people that bought it the confidence to use it. And I think they've done a good job at bringing those key components together. So beautifully simple.
We need more beautifully simple solutions in local government and probably in the whole world.
Yes. You got enough to deal with as it is, as city managers and mayors and councils.
Well, before we wrap up, is there anything that we missed about smart meters that you think we should talk about?
I really think I applaud, the cities today that are really taking a look at their long-term infrastructure plans and their long-term needs in addressing those. The products today that are being offered, and especially by our company, have some of the longest warranties that are out there. The investments last a lot longer. The equipment doesn't have to be replaced as often. And so making those investments, even partial, if you have to put a water improvement project in the metering side, it's scalable nowadays. You don't have to do it all at once like you used to. Automation used to have to be fully deployed, and then you put your meters out to be able to see what you have. Now you can do it in sections. The cellular world and what we call the LTM band, or the machine-to-machine network, is a network that's 50 feet above every utility in America, that's available to be tapped into for automation. So the hoops and the jumps and the high burning hoops of flame that we used to have to jump through to pull this off, are no longer there. It involves an app and a magnet and some Bluetooth and some programming, and it goes pretty quick. The simplicity of it, I think, is in that beautifully simple, kind of closing that off again, circling back to that. It doesn't take anything to schedule a demo and learn. You go to the conventions and you walk around and you see people carrying all these brochures. It's easy to go back and get confused with all that. So taking the time to have somebody, a real human, come see you, sit down, show you how it works would be something that I would encourage them to do, because we're all here and we want to do that. We want to be able to show you that. It's not as daunting as it used to be, and it's got a lot easier with computers and everything else. I encourage and challenge all utilities, regardless of where you are on the journey, is to continually learn about what's available before you just keep putting, more investments into old technology out there, because it's changed a lot, and it's caught this industry a lot of it by surprise, which is very healthy for everybody, I think.
How would somebody get a hold of you if they wanted a demo?
Obviously, through Next Meters, you can reach out to me, but bjarrett@nextmeters.com is an easy way to do it. My cell phone is 903-387-3550, is available 24/7. Meter specialists like myself, I always like to say we're kind of like meter snipers. We don't sleep. We sit ready to go with our hand on the trigger at all times. We specialize nothing but in automation, and we're not here to talk about anything but that 7.5-inch lay length in everybody's front yard or those 4, 5, 6, and 8-inch meters out there in the commercial stuff. So we're available for that. Absolutely.
We'll put all that information in the show notes. So if you're driving, you don't have to write it down. Just come back to the show notes. It'll be there for you. I really appreciate you being on. I've never met a professional bass fisherman, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, it's fun. Went fishing day before yesterday and had a great afternoon. I've circled back to the enjoyment of fishing. The paychecks are a little more consistent in the water meter world than it was bass fishing, but being out on the water and enjoying nature and being out in all the great goodness of blue skies and the wind and a beautiful summer afternoon is very refreshing and fun. And to catch a fish was a bonus now. And I've gotten back to what got me into it to begin with. And so being out there with my wife and son was wonderful. Unfortunately, I've gotten hooked on saltwater fishing now too. So that's a new thing that's bitten me. So I find myself headed south quite frequently to the bays of Texas and South Louisiana for redfish, trout, and flounder. So I got a new horizon to climb.
Can you give our busy public works directors and utility billing folks out there some words of encouragement or some advice, something they can use to get through their busy days?
Number one, I know that, many, many, many people don't know what it takes to get water to somebody's house. But, after being in the business and being from the fishing world, but coming to your world, I can't tell how much I appreciate what it takes to get a gallon of potable, fresh water through a utility, from getting it out of the ground, buying it from another utility, processing it, pressuring it, getting it to the right place, making sure it stays protected all the way to somebody's house. And, when I look at my family budget and the cost of gasoline and food and everything else, that $45 minimum bill I get for a couple thousand gallons is probably the cheapest thing. And so I think y'all go a little bit unappreciated many times for the amount of miles and distance that water had to go to get to somebody's house. And when somebody complains about a $58 water bill with a $40 minimum bill, my heart's with you, buddies. So I hate it. You have to hear that because that's the cheapest thing that I can assure you that's going to their house considering their last fill up. So anyway, keep up the great work, keep the good spirits, and I sure appreciate what everybody does out there on that side.
Yeah, we definitely take that for granted until it doesn't work, and then we're on the phone complaining. Well, Ben, thanks for being on with us. If you want to connect with Ben, you can find him on LinkedIn. The show notes will have the information he gave out earlier, or you can check out NextMeters USA's website at nextmeters.com. Don't forget to follow Clear Career Professionals on LinkedIn and subscribe to our newsletter, The Clear View. Check out our website, clearcareerpro.com, for the latest career opportunities and other services that Clear offers. Please give The Clear Voice a review on your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe to the show so you don't miss anything, and we will catch you next time.